Sometimes all it takes is a single social media post to potentially flip decades of foreign policy on its head. That's exactly what we're looking at today, a threat of U.S. military action in Nigeria. This is way more than just political talk. It's a move that could totally reshape security in the region and seriously affect millions of lives. So let's break down what was said, why it's such a big deal, and what's really at stake here.
So this is it, the post that lit the fuse. The language is incredibly direct, promising to go into Nigeria guns a-blazing to deal with terrorists behind horrible atrocities. These aren't the usual vague diplomatic warnings. These are the explicit, powerful words that set off alarm bells around the world and made everyone ask if we're about to see a radical shift in American foreign policy.
Okay, so what's the official reason for a threat this dramatic? Well, the Post frames it as a really clear-cut mission. It's all about protecting our cherished Christians. The idea is to position this potential military action as a direct response to religious persecution.
And the mission, as it's laid out, has two very clear goals. First, stop the killing of Christians. And second, wipe out the Islamic terrorist groups they say are responsible for the violence. It's all presented as a pretty straightforward solution to a very clear problem.
And they're not being shy about who they're targeting either. They name names. We're talking about Boko Haram, a group you've probably heard about in the news for years, and also the Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP. Both of these groups are officially designated as foreign terrorist organizations by both the US and the UN, making them the declared enemies in this whole scenario.
On the surface, it sounds simple, right? Good guys versus bad guys. But as it usually goes with geopolitics, the reality on the ground is, well, it's a lot messier. So that's the big question we have to ask. Is the situation in Nigeria really this straightforward?
To really get what's going on, we have to look past the headlines and dive into the complex reality of Nigeria. Because that simple story of just one group being targeted, it really doesn't capture the whole picture, not even close.
First things first, you gotta understand the layout of the country. Nigeria is, broadly speaking, divided along religious lines. You've got a predominantly Muslim north and a largely Christian south. This demographic fact is absolutely crucial for understanding the country's internal conflicts.
And get this, it's not just us saying it's complicated. A U.S. commission that looks at religious freedom is actually pushed for Nigeria to be labeled a country of particular concern. And the reason why is critical. They point to the ongoing persecution of both Christians and Muslims.
And the story gets even broader. Amnesty International has reported that the Nigerian government has basically failed to protect its citizens, all of them, from armed attacks. This points to a massive, widespread security failure, not just something aimed at one religion.
And the human cost of this is just staggering. We're talking about more than 10,000 people killed in all kinds of armed attacks. This isn't a conflict affecting just one community. The suffering is everywhere, creating an absolutely massive humanitarian crisis.
Now, this aggressive threat also creates a pretty fascinating political contradiction back in the United States, especially when you put it side by side with the main foreign policy message of the 2024 campaign.
I mean, you can see it right here, clear as day. On one hand, a key campaign promise is to stop wars, not start them, a very anti-interventionist message. And on the other hand, you have this threat against Nigeria promising to go in guns a-blazing. You really can't get much more opposite than that.
But the threat wasn't just about military action. The Post also promised to immediately stop all U.S. aid to Nigeria. And that raises a huge question. Beyond all the political talk, what would the actual, real-world consequences of that be for millions of people?
To really wrap your head around what's at stake, you have to follow the money. Because the U.S. isn't just some distant observer here. It's Nigeria's single biggest donor. The financial ties are absolutely massive. We're talking over $1 billion in aid to Nigeria every single year. Cutting that off wouldn't just be a small gesture. It would create an immediate, enormous financial shockwave that would ripple through the entire country.
So where does all that cash actually go? You might think it's all for military hardware, but nope. The largest slice of that pie is for health and humanitarian aid. We're talking about fundamental, life-saving support for millions of regular people.
Let's get really specific about the human cost here. Cutting this aid could mean millions of people lose access to their HIV treatment, It could stop vaccination programs in their tracks. It could halt food assistance for people who've been forced from their homes. In short, it could take an already terrible humanitarian crisis and turn it into an absolute catastrophe.
So we're left with this fundamental question. Is this a bold and necessary stand to protect a persecuted group? Or is it a dangerous gamble that uses aggressive language, risks the lives of millions who depend on that aid, and completely oversimplifies a conflict that is anything but simple?
Hey, if this breakdown helped you make sense of this complicated issue, please do us a huge favor and hit that like button. And definitely subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive.
There is so much to unpack here, and we really want to know what you think. Is military intervention the right move? What about the consequences of cutting off aid? Let us know your perspective down in the comments.
Thank you for watching Policy in Plain English.